What's good? What's good, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of The Urban Platform Speaks. Uh, Make sure to like and subscribe as you tune into the channel. Check out the content. And with that being said, I want to react to some statements that Emmanuel Acho made, right? And these statements that he made about this new head coach and Shedeur Sanders, Todd Monken, is he's getting a lot of pushback. And like Emmanuel Acho always seemed to make statements that it seems like he's not really being honest and upfront. It just seems like he's just trying to get clicks and views, right? So he's going for the hot take. But these statements that Emmanuel Acho really just made this time, I think kind of, people kind of get the point that he's being really disingenuous. And this is not some advice that you would give to a young player, right? Especially somebody who's in a position as Shedeur Sanders. Like this, he's going to go into his second year. And so Emmanuel Acho, his point of view is like, why should Shedeur Sanders be excited about the hiring of Todd Monken? When I don't think Shedeur Sanders, as a second-year quarterback, is really in a position to, like, his main focus should be getting better as a quarterback and not really focus on like the head coach's job, or can this head coach lead us to the playoffs and then to the Super Bowl, right? Because he has enough on his plate as a player to learn how to be a professional quarterback, and to get better. That's what he need to be his main focus. So Jason Whitlock on his show is really calling out Emmanuel Acho for his take on the Todd Monken hiring and the statements that he made about Monken and Shedeur Sanders. So I want to play the audio from Jason Whitlock's podcast, and then I'm gonna come back and I'm gonna react.
Nothing about Todd Monken as a head man gets me excited. I need to see who the offensive coordinator is going to be. That's what I need to see. But what I don't yet see, T, is like, how is Todd Monken going to command that locker room, command that group of men? And also, if I'm Shedeur or anybody in that locker room, why am I listening to Todd Monken? What have you won on an NFL level as a head coach? You're not even a head coach on an NFL level. So I don't even have expectations for Shedeur under Todd Monken, because I believe any expectations I would have, he would not meet. Because why am I excited about it, T?
All right, so like I said, it's not a situation where Todd Monken has to prove himself to Shedeur Sanders. As a professional athlete, you have to you want to get better. Now, if the coach don't live up to and don't fulfill his end of the bargain, you can't, as a player, fall back and say, well, Todd Monken, he wasn't a really good head coach. You still are trying to put yourself in a position where, as though, you want to get better, and you trying to, and you fighting for your job. So why, he's kind of, in my opinion, he's just kind of putting the cart before the horse, because you want to, later on down the line, if Shedeur Sanders is having success and Todd Monken is the reason why the team can't advance, then you express your dislikes or your reservations for having Todd Monken as a coach. But as a second year player, I don't think that should be Shedeur Sanders' concern. Like I said, he fighting for his career. So why, he can't blame anything on Todd Monken if it don't go right.
Why?
So I want to address what Emmanuel Acho is doing here, and I'm going to go really big picture here, and some of you will be bothered by how big picture I'm going to go. But I just have to do it because it's just factual. What Emmanuel Acho is basically arguing there is rebellion. And that's always the message to young black men. Rebel. I talk about this all the time. And I talk about how football, particularly the quarterback position, is best played by men who are willing to submit. and who are willing to submit themselves to their head coach. And Emmanuel Acho, trying to appeal to the culture, trying to appeal to social media, is actually arguing what has been popularized through Black Lives Matter and everything else of rebel, rebel, rebel. Don't submit to authority.
All right. So I don't know. Like when he draw the connection to Black Lives Matter, and like what Emmanuel Acho is saying. I don't really the connection. I don't want to go that far, right? But I do think that like as a player, players should stay in their place and not really be concerned about how good the coach is doing his. Like you got to first be able to do your job before you can worry about what somebody else is doing as far as like their jobs. And that's my thing. So don't put the message out there for Shedeur Sanders or young players to saying that like what has Todd Monken done as a coach. You don't have any control over that. Like the owner hired Todd Monken, and I don't care if you are Myles Garrett or if you Shedeur Sanders, you still have a job to do on that team. And every time you go out on the field, whether you're going to be with the Cleveland Browns or not, you're still auditioning for your job, and you might be auditioning for teams around the league. So you can't just say, "Well, what has Todd Monken?" It just don't make any sense.
And Emmanuel Acho is getting killed by everybody over social media. There's never been a ratio like what's transpiring with Emmanuel Acho on this. Everybody in unison is calling Emmanuel Acho a clown. And so I applaud people for doing that. But I question.
I think it's good that people calling, they see right through what Emmanuel Acho is doing, and they understand that, it's about everybody doing their job. You can't worry about what Todd Monken, like I said, he was appointed the coach, and you gotta, you just have to make the best of that situation, whether he turned out to be a good coach or not a good coach.
Why you can't see the exact same thing when you look out at Black Lives Matter, you look out at these videos, you look at George Floyd, any of these guys that are refusing to submit to law enforcement. It's the same thing. It's like if you want success in life, if you want success in the NFL or as a quarterback, hey, submit to the authority that's been put in charge of you. Even if you don't like the authority, even if the authority doesn't excite you, as Emmanuel Acho is saying. And I pointed this out yesterday on Emmanuel Acho's Twitter bio. These guys are very clever, very slick with their messaging as it relates to and their objection to a biblical worldview. Emmanuel Acho's bio on Twitter says, if I followed anyone, it would be Jesus Christ. And he's using this as a declaration of faith. But who says, anybody that's following Jesus Christ considers them a Christian, who said, if I was, I would follow Jesus Christ? What you're telling me is you don't follow. You're saying if you did, you would, but you don't. And Emmanuel Acho presents himself as some sort of soft Christian, but we can see in his worldview and the things that come out of his mouth that he's not a Christian. In fact, he's doing messaging that is antithetical to Christianity.
All right. So the point I want to make, like Jason Whitlock is going, he's carrying it a lot further than what I was going, than I want to carry. But I do think that you can't tell a young person that it's a bad example and a bad precedent to tell a young person, that, you have to look at a coach and say, well, what have you done? Where have you been? when his job, like everybody is not going to have like a Phil Jackson. Everybody's not going to have a Bill Belichick as a head coach, somebody with like 6 Super Bowl rings. You know, like every coach in the NFL don't have that type of resume. But just because they don't have Bill Belichick's resume, that don't mean that they're not going to turn out to be a good coach. That don't mean that you should not, as a team, you can't buy into the program that the head coach is going to sit down. Because if you want to have any type of success, you're going to have to buy into a program. You know, if you want to have team success, you're going to have to buy into a program. And there's no guarantee that that program is going to work for you, but at least still you had an opportunity to, as an individual, work on your game at the same time and get better. But you just can't tell young players or players at all to, like, you know, rebel because, oh, this wasn't a good hire. You know, what has he done? Like, you know, look at his resume. You, as a player, that's not your that's really not like your position to be looking at the coach's resume. Like I said, everybody not gonna be Bill Belichick. You know, the guy, what's the guy named Walsh that coached the 49ers back in the day, you know, had 4 Super Bowls. All coaches, you know, and so these kids have to buy into the program. I mean, and they really, if they want to have some type of success, they don't have no choice. I remember not like, I don't know if it was a couple years ago, Cam Newton had he had like a football camp, and a kid, you know, and the kid got disrespectful to Cam Newton and was talking about like, why are you not in the league right now, or what happened during your career, like why, you know. And I'm like, this kid, you in high school trying to go to college, and you disrespecting like a guy like Cam Newton, who's one of the best college athletes to come through college, and then was a really good professional athlete. And that right there is the mentality I think that is going to hold that particular kid back. And it's the mentality that, like, almost like what Emmanuel Acho is promoting. Like, kids look at adults and people and say, you know, whereas though they feel like they can question your credibility. You know, Cam Newton threw that camp for the kids. That kid should have been so respectful, so appreciative, and just trying to soak up all the knowledge that he could get from Cam Newton, a guy who played professionally. And you know what? And then the fact that Cam Newton had a really good professional career should not have even played into it. The fact that he made it to that level, like if you was a second string quarterback at the professional level, and you threw a football, and you'd had a camp for kids, you know, and you made it, you know, the kids should be trying to soak up every bit of knowledge that you have, man, to make it to that level. So the message by Emmanuel Acho, in my opinion, is just was way off. And it was cool. I thought it was good that people called him out for that, because as a player, that's not a player's position to call out coaches and management and stuff like that. They don't have that expertise and that knowledge to be able to do that. So that's my take on it. I wouldn't go as far as what Jason Whitlock like to tie that into Black Lives Matter. I see the kind of point he's trying to make when it comes to people like respecting authority. And you do need to absolutely respect authority, right? But you know, I don't know. That's an example that he made, but that's my take on it. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to leave a comment. And with that being said, man, I'm gonna check y'all out in the next video.